Okay, so this has had some time to dry. This is just a first coat. So the next thing we'll do is we'll just lightly scrape off any of the high spots. Do it for both sides. And then we're going to start with our loading mud. Sorry, our finishing mud. And then we'll start to go over. So start from here, we'll encase all of this and go over to here. Alright guys, so we're going to now do our first coat of mud. So this is what I'm going to use, light finishing joint compound. So it even says here, do not use to embed tape as first coat over metal beads or trim. So loading mud is for your tape, and for everything else you can use this stuff. Once again, same thing. Mix it up for a few minutes in a clean bucket. Make sure there's no dry pieces of mud, otherwise it's going to mangle up your work. Okay, so we can see the first coat here. I already did the very top. Now, because we're so close to a wall, what I would suggest is start from this side and pull away. Okay, so from this side here, I'm going to go tight with the pressure. As I go across the tape, I'm going to pull the pressure back, and then as I get to this side, I'm going to put the pressure back on. And if I'm going to go across, this side will be tight, and then I'll raise this side out a little bit. Guys, like I said, this is just feel, it's practice. There's nothing I can do to guide you through by watching a video. This is just hours of work. So one thing to be mindful of, make sure that you have a bucket of water to throw your tools into as you fill up your tray, like this here. Because if you leave this stuff out, the compound is going to start to dry out, and then you're going to get little spots and you destroy your own job. And one other thing is, don't start in the middle of your mud. Don't start from like here. Always start from drywall, like flat, dry. So here, down here we have drywall that is not coated in mud, so we'll start from here and then we'll go over. And now I can feel that there's a hump here, so I'm going to go back and forth and try to smooth everything out. I'm sure the professionals can do this in maybe 2 coats of mud. I'm not a professional, so it'll take me a little bit more, but as long as the result is there at the very end, I'll be happy with it. So for this here, this is where the old countertop used to be. All I'm going to do is just fill it with mud. I mean, I don't think taping this thing is worth the time. Now, because this is thicker, it's going to take longer to dry down here. I don't know if it's going to crack, but we'll figure this out. This is not, guys, this is not my specialty. This is DIY once again. This is just stuff that I've learned over the years. And then when you're doing this, remember, you're always taking more mud off. You can move a little bit of mud around based on how much pressure you're putting there, but you're cleaning the mud off and you're going thinner. So stuff like this here, if you can see a prominent line, then you need to smooth the thing out. And then we have something like here. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go tight on this side, and then I'm just going to try to go over. One other thing I've learned is, if you can't get it, if you can't fix an area, leave it, let it dry, and then add a little bit more. You can always go a little bit wider. But this, for me, is, right now, this is okay. This is my first coat of mud. I'll let this dry, and then we'll come back and do it again. Okay, so from the very top, you can already see that this is starting to dry out. You will see a different color in the mud when you have a dry spot and spots that aren't dry yet. And one place that we will take a look at will be down here later on. This here will still be wet because it's so thick, and everything else will be dry. But this is my first coat. We'll let this dry, and then we'll come back and do the next coat. I need a minimum of 2 because I'm not the greatest at this, but in general, I'm relatively happy with my results. So from here, I'll start once again from here, and then I'll go tighter on the pressure right here, and then I'm going to try to smooth it out. And also, because this is so tight to the corner, I'll put my first amount of mud farther away, and then I will start to smooth it out, and then I can put that to the back and try to get a nice edge out of it. So I have a pocket right there, so I'll take a little bit of mud. And from here, I'll go tight with pressure on this side. And then try to smooth everything out. And to fill in any pockets, so I'll start from here. The amount of mud and where it is on your drywall knife will all matter. So to clean this up, you just keep going across, and guys, like I said, everything here is just practice. And it's endless practice. Now, because we have this here, that's going to be a little bit tougher to contend with. But what I'll do is I'll start from here, go across. And because of this here, I'm not going to go back this way unless I have to fill something. Now guys, one thing to keep in mind, because this is a relatively small space, you can do this pretty quickly. But if you're doing a much bigger space, make sure that you take your drywall knife and just dip it in water. Every so often, I don't know, maybe every 10 minutes. Just to keep any mud on the knife from drying onto it, because then you will see the little scratches in your drywall as you go along. Alright, so there's our first coat of mud. You go down the line. So I plan to encase this on the next one. Now guys, keep in mind, in this case, I have to stop here, so you can't go as wide as you want. But as I've already suggested, I think it's better to do less coats, less mud and more coats to fix your drywall any imperfections. I know drywall will go up to a level 5, which means that is 5 coats of mud after the tape, and then they just keep going wider and wider and wider until they smooth it all out. Well, by looking at the amount of shadow that there is, there's not too much. But unfortunately, this is not quite where I want it to be right now. Unfortunately, I don't have a choice and I have to do my next coat before I get out of here tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. So I'm going to scrape the back side behind me with the GFCI. And then we'll come back when I'm ready to do the next coat. Alright, so we're going to do our next coat of mud. So guys, I poured a little bit of water into the mud just to keep the mud nice and wet. So first of all, get the water out. And you just need a skim layer of water for your mud. It just needs to be submerged in the mud. You don't need to fill the entire bucket up with water. So now what I'll do is I'll remix this. Alright, I'm starting on my next coat. So this is the second coat of mud. So I've already done the top. I'm now going to use the 8-inch knife to load, and then I'm going to use a 12-inch knife to smooth it out. So you can see how there's no mud down here, and this has now been encased in mud, and it'll be generally the same thing. I find it easier for myself personally to load with the 8-inch drywall knife and then smooth it out with the 12. But I will have to do one more coat after this because I'm just not that good at it. So what I'll do is I'll generally go and mud my area. This one's a small one, so I'll do about half, or what's easy to reach, and then I'll do the other half. So in this case, I already did the top because that was tougher to reach, so I did that first. And like I said, every coat you want to go wider and then start to smooth everything out. I only have this big of an area to work with, so this is where it matters, especially about going with thin coats and just doing more coats if you need to. And here is a couple pieces of dry mud. This is why it's very important to try to minimize or ideally eliminate having any little dry pieces of mud in your mud, because then it's going to create streaks that you have to go fix. Alright, so that is as far as I'm going to go with my second coat. You can still see that it's a little bit rough, but what I'll do is I'll come back tomorrow. We'll scrape this off. I will do a light sanding to try to even this out, and then we'll do one more coat. So this is my second coat. I've pretty well encased the entire patch here. It's not looking too bad. Remember guys, you're gonna go by the shadow that you see, and that'll give you an idea of how smooth it is. So instead of doing a third coat and trying to go wider, because I don't have the time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my smallest putty knife and just do a skim coat and fill in any of the divots or imperfections or anything like that. Because this is going to be such a thin layer of mud, you don't have all that much time to work, so make sure that when you get it the way that you're relatively happy with it, just leave it, because if it starts to dry and then you start to mess with it, you're just going to make a mess that you have to go back and fix. But this is where I'm going to go over all the small little indentations, valleys, pits, or anything else to smooth out the surface. So for the corner of the wall, since I'm only doing the one side, I'm not using my inside corner tool. I'm only going to use a regular straight drywall knife and then just keep the mud on the side that I'm working on. So at the top you can see all the little patches that I did, and then as we go down the wall you can see the divots and pits that I haven't done yet. Guys, once again, based on the color of the mud you can tell what the level of dryness is. Same thing other side. I think this side came out better, it was smoother, but it's the same thing, just fill any little pits or divots or anything else, any imperfections that you notice. Alright, so I already went ahead and sanded this side. Sand in a circular motion, don't do a straight line, and feather the edges out. So you can see the very left side how it's a smooth transition. If you see a very prominent line, that means that you have a hump, and you are going to notice this with paint. Paint will only exaggerate any flaws that you see before you paint. And this is the other side sanded. So the two tests that you're going to do is you're going to do the feel test, run your hand along the wall. You should not feel any transition. And then the light test, the shadow test, you're looking for any shadows. Here it's still too wet. You can see how it's a little bit darker. I went back and I fixed this later, but that also will be dependent on how much you had to put on in one spot. But as a general rule of thumb, you want to put on less and just do more coats. Alright guys, so that concludes this project. So the single biggest thing here is the drying time between coats. I think at the temperature that I had, it was like 6 to 7 hours between coats. I would say every coat will take less time than the previous, because you should be going wider and you should be putting on less, but loading the tape, I think that'll take the longest time to dry. What you can do, I didn't have that luxury here, but you can use a space heater. If you're going to use a space heater, don't direct the heat directly at the mud. Try to, I guess, indirectly heat up the room. So this is what they do in construction. They would set up a bunch of heaters and heat up the entire unit, opposed to one place. If you put direct heat, your mud can dry too quickly and then it can crack, and then you have to go and fix it. The time on this job, the time to move the outlet, to tape, mud, do all the extra coats, and then sand, the time was probably about 12 hours in total. The cost of this job, so the outlet, the box, the tape, the mud, plywood screws, and everything else, the total was probably about $100. So drywall specifically, the material's not expensive, it's the labor that's going to kill you. And this is a perfect example, this job here, that if you want to hire somebody, you're not going to find anybody interested unless it's like your next door neighbor. Because to do 1 hour of mudding work and then waiting 6 hours for it to dry, there's no one that's going to be interested in something that is in this job that isn't practical use of their time, unless you're willing to pay way too much money to have it done. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. I hope something here is going to help you on your project when you need to go ahead and do that. Guys, till next time, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next project.